Greetings, Stoneridge community. I'm Eileen Emerson Boles from the class of 1990, coming to you from San Francisco. And as a teacher, I'll use some of those techniques I've learned over the past year of online learning. So let's get started with our first question. As I look back now with 30 years of hindsight, I think my experience at Stoneridge set me in a different direction for life than I might have otherwise taken. If my expected path had taken shape, I would have gone to another school, the one that my mom and older sisters went to. That school announced its closing when I was in 7th grade, and so my mom determined that Stoneridge would be the best spot for me. At the time, I didn't agree, but as usual in my life, my mom was right. And after the proverbial teenage grumbling, I hopped on the 30 ride-on and made my way to 9101 Rockville Pike. Since graduation, I've always thought of myself as a Goal 5 girl. Frank Sinatra's My Way comes to mind. I certainly did some winding around on the journey during my 4 years at Stoneridge, and I've worn my Goal 5 award from graduation as a kind of badge of honor. So you can imagine my surprise when I worked at Stoneridge for a school year. During that 007 year working at Stoneridge, one of my most memorable faculty meetings came late in the spring. It was the meeting at which we'd be choosing the graduation awards. First, all the academic merit awards were decided. And then Christina Keong, the director of studies at the time, who was chairing the meeting, got to the Sacred Heart Goal Awards, and I perked up. The first one had to do with faith commitment, and one of the girls was selected. The second, intellectual commitment, another selection. The third one had to do with commitment to social justice, and one of the girls was selected. The fourth one had to do with commitment to community, and another senior was selected for the award. Before I get to the fifth award, let me say that I find this as a teacher, and I found it as a principal. These can be some of the most wonderful discussions of the entire school year for a faculty, as the teachers lobby for those they think have merited an award. It's when you hear the absolute best of the faculty in their love of the students. When Christina arrived at the fifth Goal Award, she prefaced it by saying, "I like to think of this as the prodigal son or daughter award." My jaw must have hit the floor when she said that. The screw-up who realized her wrongs and was welcomed back with loving arms. That was me. I'd been that prodigal daughter 20 years before. Of course, the loving had never stopped. I just hadn't chosen to embrace it. I guess I do have a bit of the wandering daughter in me, and Luke's parable certainly provides ripe food for thought during the season of Lent. I love Henry Nouwen's treatment of the parable in Return of the Prodigal Son. At times, we find ourselves in each of the roles: prodigal daughter, forgiving parent, jealous sibling. Now, as a teacher of high school students, and in particular, both boys and girls who are in their first year of high school in this most unusual school year, I'm probably called to mercy most often these days. So the role of the loving parent to my students presents a terrific goal to strive for during this season. And even as I'm drawn to mercy personally during the season of Lent, I'm called to be a person of mercy and love to my students and family in every season. Hindsight is 20/20, of course, but I have to admit that even though it was probably never obvious to my classmates or teachers, I think I really did appreciate my Stoneridge education at the time. The intellectual rigor and the focus on girls speaking up was eye-opening to me. I'd had a solid parish school education, and I came into first academic, prepared on paper. But I remember being completely nonplussed when I entered Muriel Keith's freshman English class. Mrs. Keith was a powerhouse for sure, but I was seated next to Katie Bergen, and that girl dove into literature. She had ideas, opinions, statements to make. I didn't realize people did that in school. I thought school was about regurgitating what the teacher told you. The other area of our education that really impacted me for life was the commitment to social action across every aspect of the school. I was drawn to helping others, and although I couldn't articulate it at the time, experiential learning is certainly my preference. So my choices for our actual service learning experiences usually revolved around work with elderly people, since that was my comfort zone. But I can think of several classmates who really got it in terms of social justice. In particular, Peggy Ambrose's persistent advocacy for some, or Liz Zogby's activism in support of SCCA, the Student Coalition to Combat Apartheid, come to mind. Those young women witnessed it within our community and beyond, and their efforts had long-lasting effects on my understanding of a social awareness that leads to action. In the year I spent employed at Stoneridge, I worked on the formal social action program and helped the school community reflect on how social action might better match the passions and intellectual gifts of the students on the one hand, with the goals and particularly the criteria of Sacred Heart education on the other hand. I'd come to Stoneridge from working for Catholic Relief Services, and so the passion for social justice I'd witnessed in my classmates had finally caught up to me. I could put the pieces together and see that the social action program could grow in new and exciting ways, and hopefully further engage the girls in meaningful experiences that would in turn transform society. In a way, that work to me felt like appreciation 25 years past due. While I was working at Catholic Relief Services, I had occasion to host Stoneridge seniors for their internship week and return for Alumnae phonathons. The contact for both of those activities was the amazing Ginny Koss. I had not been one of Ginny's all-star American history students as a junior, and yet she always welcomed this prodigal daughter back to Stoneridge with open arms and often shared a giggle with me over my unmotivated student past. It was particularly ironic because I was working on my master's in teaching at the time. I have a very particular recollection of Ginny pulling me into the Hamilton House hallway at the end of one of the phonathon sessions and saying to me, "I want you to be a Sacred Heart educator, Eileen." I casually replied to her, "I'll always be a Sacred Heart educator, Dr. Koss, just not at a Sacred Heart school." Well, truth be told, a few years later, I did return and worked at Stoneridge for a year. And I currently work at a school called Sacred Heart. It's just in a different network of schools, both LaSallian and Vincentian. So both Ginny and I were right in that hallway conversation. But even though I'm not at a network of Sacred Heart schools school, I believe that I really am a Sacred Heart educator because the pedagogical genius of Sacred Heart schools echoes deep with my own educational philosophy. I read the criteria related to Goal 2 and I'm jazzed. Those RSCJs and their lay collaborators got it going on. I get to give back on my Sacred Heart education here in San Francisco by serving on the Alumnae board for Lone Mountain, the 4-year Sacred Heart College for Women that closed when I was in kindergarten, but whose incredibly resilient alumnae continue to partner with the University of San Francisco, who purchased their beautiful campus and where I earned my doctorate in 2015 with significant support from the Lone Mountain Legacy Scholarship. It's like life comes full circle. I attended Stoneridge because my mom's alma mater closed, and now I get to give back to a Sacred Heart community of women whose school closed, but whose spirit is very much alive. I like the idea of the new buildings at Stoneridge serving as the heart of campus, bringing everyone together, those open arms from Luke's parable drawing us in. It's a great metaphor for our connection back. The campus and what emerges from there is like the beating heart of our extended community with arms outstretched. And whether we're gathering there or increasingly in these days online, it's like getting back to the heart where we were formed or transformed as young women of faith, intellect, and action. The beating heart and open, loving arms are always there. Thank you.